This is going to be the DVO suspension review. If you're looking for the short answer, DVO suspension is a mix of genius and jankiness. The setup of it, I went on a couple rides on my Specialized Enduro. I'm going to tell you how it went and what the company's all about. First thing I want to do is decode DVO suspension. So it stands for Developed Suspension. They're a boutique, small company, suspension company out of California. The differentiating factor, their stuff is pretty affordable for the everyday rider. It's priced just about the same as RockShox products. They make 3 single crown forks. We got the Onyx, the Diamond, and the Sapphire. For this video, I have a Diamond D1 and a Topaz 3. Whenever you see D1 on the fork, that's the top level, the best damper you can get. All the other stuff I didn't look into. We got 3 generations of Topaz. The first generation looks a little bit different. The second and the third look the same. I guess the third one's a little improved from some Google searching I did. Now, DVO suspension does things way different than everybody else. So let me explain the forks. It has an air cartridge, basically a high pressure air spring, and then a coil spring on the bottom. They call it OTT. To put it in plain English, it's a mix of new technology and old in one chamber. Anyway, let me tell you the story. So it starts out, I borrow this suspension from my friend because it's sitting on the shelf, pop it in my Specialized Enduro, it makes this horrible crunching noise. I'm like, wow, the thing's broken right out of the box. Go on the internet, it looks like the bladder loses air, so you have to check the bladder pressure, the secondary air chamber on the shock every 30 days to make sure it holds air. It's basically like a little condom in the piggyback, and I guess that condom loses air. If you're on the heavier side of things, everything you do is going to be on the maximum side for air pressure and OTT, the little adjustment on the bottom of the fork. My friend calls me for a shuttle day. I'm kind of in a rush. Put the Topaz on the bike, pumped that bladder up, went out on the trail, and let me tell you how it went. Less than ideal conditions, an absolute mud bog day, but it's called mountain biking for a reason. I put 2 tokens in the Topaz, kept the lyric on the front, not to over confuse myself. Having to pump the shock to 300 PSI to get 30% sag, it was not looking good on this ride. The Topaz is unusable at 300 PSI, but it does have some tricks up its sleeve for heavyweight riders. Unfortunately, this day was almost a complete loss. Its one redeeming quality, it does have a 3-position compression lever, and the middle setting works excellent with 50% sag. So I contacted DVO and let them know that their suspension was basically unusable for a 220-pound rider on a long travel bike. I would prefer the coil, but I just got a Topaz here. So Bobby from DVO gave me about a 20-minute education about suspension setup, and I was kind of shocked. They have a very unique value proposition by helping riders directly. You can't reach out to Fox or RockShox for advice. You gotta watch my cringy videos that may not even work for your riding style. So Bobby told me for my weight, I need to add negative tokens to the Topaz to make it more usable. And I'm like, I don't like negative tokens because they make a harsh ride. And he's like, this is what you have to do. I took the advice and I put 2 negative volume tokens in the DVO Topaz and then took it out for a ride. But first, let me tell you what negative volume tokens do to your shock. Increase the stroke support throughout the range, make harder breakaway pressure, and it can make it easier to use all the travel, so you have to add regular tokens in there too. The use case for negative tokens is heavy riders or aggressive riders. They're kind of one and the same. So I'm not very aggressive at riding, but I'm pretty heavy, so I'm kind of equal to an aggressive rider. So the Diamond D1 is equivalent to a RockShox Lyric. It only goes to 160 millimeters of travel, has 35 millimeter stanchions. It's kind of an all-mountain fork. Kind of a bummer, it has a direct mount 160 right here, so you gotta add a plus 40 to run a 200 millimeter rotor. Got some extra advice from DVO on setting up the fork. So basically, if you're a heavy rider, just crank the OTT in all the way tight till it stops. It's basically like preloading an old school coil fork. Taking the full DVO suspension out to my most familiar little trail system, let me tell you how it went. First test run on the DVO Diamond fork. This fork rides like no other fork you've ever rode before. It's a very unique experience. I personally didn't like it right off the bat. I set everything up to exactly what DVO said for sag and rebound, and I found it not working very good. The good news is the Topaz was just working so great with those negative tokens. The negative tokens installed in the shock let me run like 50 psi less than I was before, making the shock completely usable. Due to that half air, half coil fork, you need to run a stupid fast rebound to make this fork feel good. So the second ride was kind of a mixed bag. Because of the vastly different air spring inside of the DVO Diamond, it takes some getting used to. Personally, I didn't like the way the fork felt with the high-speed compression turned on, so I opened it back up, put 20 psi extra in the fork, headed out to the trail center, and let's see how it goes. Once you understand how the DVO suspension works and you set it up correctly, like way more air pressure and rebound than you think, it works great. Corners great, excellent mid-stroke support, a dynamic, fun ride you can pop and play, and it's super plush and quiet. It's like having your cake and eating it. You can't get a plush fork that's super quiet, except for DVO.
Oh, nice.
The DVO Topaz was pretty impressive, I'm not gonna lie. It's got a ton of negative tokens. As you can see, it's absorbing the terrain very well. Usually a shock with a ton of negative tokens in it will make a super harsh ride. Because of that bladder design, it allows it to still maintain its plushness. The Topaz is a super small shock and it performs pretty good on this Specialized Enduro. I guess it's not all about the size of the boat, it's about the motion of the ocean. The DVO Diamond fork is very impressive. It punches well above its weight. The most impressive 35mm stanchion fork I've ever rode. But it's not all perfect. The OTT adjuster on the bottom of the fork is a little bit janky. It has to be perfectly matched to the air pressure in the fork or you're going to have some really bad results. The high-speed compression adjuster is basically not movable by your own hand. You have to use the upper lever as leverage to turn it, and there's no marks, so it's pretty janky. I personally did not like the way it rode with any high-speed compression. I recommend just using air pressure, but that's also personal preference. The Topaz is absolutely genius with its dual air chambers and infinite tunability for any rider of any size, but it's also kind of janky. I can't have my shock losing air every month. That's kind of a pain in the ass. Anyway, I was really impressed by this shock and the fork, and DVO and their customer support. But if you're more of a mainstream kind of rider, I made this video right here to help you decide between Fox and RockShox, but I wouldn't hesitate to recommend DVO. I was very impressed.